Settle down, everyone. Are you all ready? The panel are waiting. Thank you very much. I really wanted to say a couple of things about the last panel, and one thing that really stood out for me was the word enjoyment, and it's something that came up yesterday as well. Plaisir, enjoyment, and I think despite the sort of gloomy predictions in that word cloud, which I don't think you really feel that, I think you all really love your jobs. This is a wonderful industry. I'm not part of it, and I can feel the love anyway. And there was something else that came out which hasn't really been mentioned so far, and that was networking. And I'm sure you're getting lots of chances in this conference to meet online and in person. And something else that came out, because we were hearing from young professionals who were already quite successful on the ladder in their careers, but it was about the shortcomings of some of their university degrees. So we're going to look at that to some extent. We're going to look at university curricula and find out if they are attractive and complete enough. And as you know, it's a very rapidly developing landscape. So is there a perfect curriculum that can enable translators and interpreters to be fit for the future? So before I hand over to my chair, I'm going to just say that we have someone joining online, and unfortunately we haven't got interpreters, so there won't be an interpreter online. But I'm going to hand over now to Emilia Perez from Nitra University.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anya. And good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone here in Brussels, but also good afternoon to everyone who is following us online. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the next discussion at this year's STEP. And as was said, our discussion will focus on university curricula design, but also delivery. And if you follow the previous panel, then I think you would agree it was very interesting really to hear about what are the struggles of young professionals, but also how they see their current operation on the market. And we will continue talking a little bit about these issues, and we will try to address to what extent does the curricula design reflect the growing complexity of translators' profiles, of which we heard quite a lot today and also yesterday. We will discuss the opportunities and challenges in moving from translation towards accessibility and seeing demands also in other areas. And in case we have enough time, we will provide also some good practice examples in addressing the training gaps and keeping up with the changing industry. And now my guests today will provide their valuable insight from the perspective of industry, academia, and also professionals. And I'm very happy that despite their very busy schedules, they were able to make it and they are here with me today. In order to introduce them briefly, you can find the full profiles later on the platform. I would like to start with Tiina. Tiina Tuominen is an acting professor of English with specialization in translation at the University of Turku in Finland. And I'm sure many of you, especially those in academia, know her work because Tiina is an amazing researcher and also amazing trainer. And her research focuses on multimodality, subtitling, reception, user-centered translation, and also translators' workplace studies. Tiina is a member of the FIT Council as well for the period of 2022-2025, and previously she has also worked as translator and subtitler for several years. So hi Tiina, I'm very happy you could be here with us today. Then my second guest is joining us online from Czech Republic, and it's Professor Jan Hajic. Hello, good afternoon to you. And Professor Hajic is a researcher and manager at the Institute of Formal and Applied Linguistics at Charles University in Prague in Czech Republic. He has done a lot of amazing research in the area of language technology and in particular in machine translation. He's also active as a LINT expert, or he's one of our LINT experts. He represents MetaNet, the Multilingual Europe Technology Alliance Network, as the chair of its executive board. So I'm very happy you could be here with us today. Then here to my right is Diego Cresceri. Diego is a CEO and founder of the Creative Words, but also Diego is currently the president of the board of directors of ELIA, the European Language Industry Association. I think regarding our topic, it's important to say that Diego holds a degree in translation and interpreting. So it's a very successful story. And he studied translation and interpreting at University of Genoa. And before founding Creative Words, he worked as translator, project manager, and chief operation officer in local translation agency. Diego is here with me, or with all of us today also, because he likes to share his knowledge on machine translation, AI, but also industry growth with academia, trainers, and young professionals. So I'm very happy you could make it. And last, but definitely not least, my dear colleague, audiovisual translator, Henrik Walter Johnson. I'm sure you know Henrik from several fora, but Henrik is also very known as Vice President, Industry License and Expansion Coordinator of the Association of Audiovisual Translators Europe, AFTE, who are here with us today as well. He is Vice President and International Liaison of the Norwegian Association of the Audiovisual Translators, NAVIO. He is Advisory Board Member of the AVT Pro certification project developed by UNA, and he is the author and project manager of national guides in subtitling for Norway, but I know that you supervise also similar projects across Europe. And Henrik has a lot of experience with the top broadcasters and end clients in Norway, but he has cooperated also with BBC, Netflix, and several award-winning films, sorry. Okay, and for those of you who have not met me before, my name is Emilia Perez. I work as a researcher and trainer at Department of Translation Studies in Constantine the Philosopher University in Nitra in Slovakia, but you might also know me from the European Masters in Translation Network, where I am one of the members of the executive board of these networks of the study programs, in which actually we established in 2019 a special working group on audiovisual translation and media accessibility training. One of our maybe most successful projects you might have come across, especially if you are a trainer, was our EMT Train-the-Trainer Translator School, where we looked at further training of not trainees, but our trainers, because that's also very important. In my research, I work with translator competencies, business administration, and audiovisual translation and media accessibility. So thus the mix of my guests today reflects also all of these areas. This was us, but maybe to give you a chance to introduce yourselves, at least a little bit, I would like to invite you to join our Slido, where we have two questions. And the first question is actually asking about your position towards university curricula design and delivery. So if you could please join the Slido and tell us whether in this context you would describe yourself as a designer, a supplier, liaison, consumer, observer, or a critic. You can select several options. We'll wait a minute. Okay, so for now we can see the percentage is reflecting the statistics from the opening, where we heard that most of the people here today are young professionals, younger than our young professionals and me on this panel. Okay, so consumers mainly, fine. Thank you for sharing this, because it will also help us maybe to address the issues directly addressing you, but we also have observers and also critics. But as Ekaterina said, don't worry of the critics, because they help you to get better. But then maybe let's have a look at the second question in our poll, which follows. And let's find out what is the general mood towards academia training here. And maybe let us know how would you describe your perspective best, because most probably this is not the first debate on university curricula you are attending. So are you more of a believer, skeptic, activist, or revolutionary? I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, it's very close, but wow, believers, fine, but then skeptics, and some people who are really trying to change things and make them better. Okay, cool. Thank you very much for now. We will get to Slido one more time, but I think it is very important for us also to know what people think about our work. And also, as we mentioned in the debates when we were preparing for today's panel, actually each of us is somehow related to training, either those of us who provide the training or who can contribute to training or who can provide us information about whether this training is sufficient. And I'll turn with my first question to you, Diego, because we can really see that people are quite optimistic, but some people are quite optimistic. What does it mean from your experience in cooperation with academia, but also your experience with young professionals? Are universities doing a good job? Are they succeeding and failing with keeping up with the trends? I know it's not possible to generalize, but from your experience, what would you say?
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, you cannot generalize, of course. Translators here would like to answer, depends on the context, I guess. I have to say that I've been involved with university since the start of my new company, by Creative Words. I actually chose the location for the office close to the university because it was my aim to involve this word as much as possible. I have to say I quite think university is doing a good job. It can improve, of course. If you ask me these questions 5 years ago, I would reply, they're doing a really bad job. But then, yeah.
So now they are a bit better. And if yes, in what?
Well, they are becoming better, some of them at least. And I also changed my mind, meaning that I think we LSPs, we need to do our job as well. We cannot just complain and blame the academia all the time, because the world is changing so fast that we need to help academia as well and to help ourselves. We cannot just complain. I think they're doing a better job, some of them. And maybe I can share some examples later. I still complain sometimes, but it's getting better, let's say.
But maybe tell us now, like if you are still complaining, what are the main things you complain about? Or if we say that maybe, because we hear that often, that maybe graduates are not ready for some of the areas of what they are going to do after the university. Which are these areas, or where should, in your opinion, universities try to do a better job, and how?
Well, we saw that in the previous panel, in one of the polls, CAT tools, for instance. Some universities are not still teaching CAT tools. Mine was not. I graduated 20 years ago, almost. They were not doing that, of course, but now it should be different. However, I think that there's a wealth of knowledge out there on the web that students can also search. And so it seems sometimes it's just an excuse. As Felipe mentioned, we need to learn 15 CAT tools. That's true for us LSPs as well. But, you know, CAT tools is something that you can learn by yourself if you want. You can practice. You can look on the internet. You will find free trainings everywhere. So that sometimes becomes sort of an excuse. I would love to see a better job in teaching the students the attitude of continuous learning rather than, you know, the technicalities, because the technicalities can be found everywhere nowadays. When I graduated, there was barely internet, so, you know, it's a little bit different now. So if there's something I would like to complain about is universities should do a better job in teaching the attitude of continuous learning and how to learn.
And I'll leave the mic with you for one more question, and then I'll move to Henrik. But yeah, actually, besides of the polls, I was surprised when we were listening to the panel before, that when the young professionals who were here with us were sharing maybe the main issues they had after entering the market, they didn't really refer to technology, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, they referred to completely other things. They actually were referring to becoming a professional and maybe finding the resources and getting the context. So maybe very different things that we usually think if we say that there is something that is surprising for them. And in this area, preparing someone to be a professional, and we will get back to it later as well. Can you see maybe that universities in cooperation with the industry, be it translation agencies, but also at other areas, are doing more than they used to?
No. My answer would be no. My actual reply to that poll was how to build a company, and I saw some similar replies. No, one of the most frequent questions is, where do I start? And I think that we need to cooperate more between these two worlds, the industry and the academia. It can be done in different ways. It can be done with trainings, can be done with, networking events where academia invites people from the industry to talk how you can open an office or how you can start finding your first customer, because that's a big barrier, of course. And well, I could talk a lot about this, but also how you can sell your services to your customers. That's not easy, and it's really a barrier, because you can be the best translators on the world, but if you are not able to find a customer, then what can you do with your skills? It's most on the soft skills part probably than anything else.
I think one of the positive points we see that, for example, in several university initiatives, but also I will mention EMT Network, but just not because I want to promote it, but also in several competence frameworks and training frameworks, we see much more reference to these skills. So, of course, we are aware that language, culture, translation, and technology competence are essential, but we are aware, and I think academia and many initiatives is becoming aware that maybe there is something more, because as you said, like someone can be the best student or the best translator, but you need to know how to enter the market. And if I could get to you, Henrik, what is the situation like in audiovisual translation? And what do you think could be the main issues of young professional entering this market? We heard some from Lucia and Ekaterina before, but again, is it mainly the technology, or what do your information from your profession, but also from after show?
We've been working a lot with technology and figuring out how to deal with that and what we're going to feel about it, because the introduction of machine translation has obviously made the job that we used to do very, very different. And Jing Han, probably one of the most famous subtitlers in the world, she said that if you take the fun bit out of subtitling, I might just go and find something else to do. So it's a deal breaker for some of us. And yet, I've been working in this industry for several years, not more than 15 years. I've seen a lot of changes coming. And if there's one thing I know, is that you have to adapt here. And that's just the reality of it. And we also do adapt in other areas in life as well. So we learn how to download apps and how to pay bills with your phone and things like that. But when it comes to subtitling as a craft, that is a skill that has now been defined. And if you divide it up too much, you're going to lose that knowledge in the population. People are, if you know how to do the queuing, like we call subtitling from scratch, if you know how to do that, if in 5 or 10 years there's not going to be any jobs of that kind, we're going to lose that craft. And that's a part of our culture as well.
Henrik, also yesterday, during several panels, and today also, our speakers touched upon AVT in other contexts that we normally would think of. Because even for me, with my students, and maybe similarly for Tina, very often when we speak about training people in subtitling or audiovisual translation, we are referring to fiction, works of fiction or artistic films or context in TV. But with the way how the communication changes and with the way how the communication has changed also during the pandemic, or what tools we use and what products we use when we communicate in a crisis situation, there is this concept of using AVT as a tool for other areas. Would you say that this is something which is becoming significant from your experience? Do audiovisual translators get a different type of assignments also maybe in using AVT in public sector or other sectors that they did not before? Or is this still just a minor thing for now? Is it still really mainly social media? Or is it becoming something where we should start looking at?
It hasn't affected me personally. I have not been doing many jobs for things like social media platforms, or if there's reporting from war zones or things like that. I have not done that, but there are people who specialize in that, and they've been doing that for years. I think I know for a fact that in terms of social media, there's very little professionalism going on there. I don't think anyone has a job subtitling for YouTube. They might have some person sitting there with the responsibility to make sure that all the technical things work, but I don't think there's anybody working as an audiovisual translator for YouTube. Not yet, I would say.
Tina, I will turn to you because if we speak about audiovisual translation, either in the traditional context or either as a tool we use when we try to share some communication, we really can see that in general the training in AVT in academia is becoming more popular. Especially in the last decade, we have many individual modules on AVT. Also, we use AVT as a tool for language training very often in some regions. And also, we use AVT also as something additional. In case a translator would come across a task which might not be his or her main specialization, but it is good to have an experience. Now, yesterday we touched upon a lot about accessibility, in sense that we would be thinking maybe more thoroughly about the specific needs of specific audiences. Is this becoming more popular in academia and in training as well? Because in research it is, we know that. But how about training? Can we see this shift from translation, using audiovisual translation, and maybe this broader concept of accessibility, really thinking about specific needs, specific audiences, specific users?
Yes, I think so. And kind of building on what you just talked about, these different platforms potentially being or providing employment for audiovisual translators, but maybe not yet. And I think that is something that trainers should be mindful of as well, and not only concentrate on fiction, not only ask students to practice with, I don't know, sitcoms or detective series or something like that, but actually do documentaries or like webinars or training videos or things like that, or even social media, and kind of build maybe the students' understanding of all the different things they can do and all the different areas where they could potentially be experts in the area of audiovisual translation, and maybe that will help then kind of spread the good message of the expertise that audiovisual translators have and what they could contribute to areas where maybe there have been more people working on subtitles, for example, who don't have that specialization, and then that could be useful. And I think accessibility is another way of thinking of that expansion. Like accessibility is kind of a near relative of audiovisual translation in many ways. There are similar challenges and similar questions being asked. So I think there's a logic to combining them in teaching and having both of those present in courses. But at the same time, we do have to remember that we don't have time and the resources to teach everything. So we have to be selective and maybe give a general grounding at least, so that students know what terms to use when they talk about these things, and know what kinds of sort of forms of expression and translation and accessibility services are out there, so that they can then keep educating themselves even in areas that universities cannot fully cover. Because I also very much agree with Diego when you said that students should be taught to kind of keep learning and to be passionate about keeping learning and having that attitude to sort of build on what they learn in the first degree, and then so in that sense maybe the task of the university could be to sort of provide this general knowledge and then something to build upon, and then that kind of broad general knowledge could certainly include accessibility and kind of thinking of translation even broadly as one type of like linguistic accessibility. So I think they do very logically belong together.
Well, I can confirm with few information from European Masters in Translation Network, where together with my colleagues who are not here with us today, but probably are following, Alina Sekara, Susanna Valdes and Lindsay Bywood, we actually researched the programs within the EMT network. And we found out that actually majority of programs are providing some sort of AVT training. I think it was around 80%, but really it can mean various things. So that is coming from specific modules to a little bit of AVT. But regarding accessibility and specific needs and specific audiences or users, we found out that at least in this network, because it was not whole European survey, we found out that accessibility was trained outside audiovisual training, I think in 1 or 2 study programs. So usually this is something which is connected. But I think one of the difficult tasks we have in academia is not that we are preparing our trainers for what the market is right now, but what it's going to be. And we don't always know what it's going to be. But in terms of accessibility in the broadest sense, Tina, who should be the future professionals then? Because, for example, we heard from young professionals that, yep, we lack some training on this and that, because now I would find it useful. I can say, as well as Diego, I lack some training on some technological stuff because it just wasn't there when I was a student. So if we're thinking about people, maybe some people moving from AVT more towards accessibility, or joining and upskilling, or broadening their skills towards accessibility, who are going to be the future specialists, and where can the people who are already on market use some opportunities for upskilling? Because this is again different group of trainees we can think of.
Yes, I think those are crucial questions, both of them. Just like we don't know what the future holds, really, I guess we don't know who the professionals are going to be. I suppose there are the people who find the motivation for it and see their own passion in it, and that's why I think it's good if universities can give this kind of broad training, which encourages people to think that accessibility can be one of those areas in which I can work, and in which this kind of a communications training and catering to various audiences is relevant, and sort of having some skills that you can then build on. But then obviously it's a very important question to think about how to provide upskilling and continuing professional development services to everyone, because we need them to learn new skills like different accessibility services, but also to keep up with technology and all the different changes, and maybe just broadening and finding new areas to work on. So who provides those services? Do we provide them in universities? How do they relate to the basic degree curricula? What's the role of professional associations, for example? Or could associations and universities work together, and what's the role of companies in that, and how could sort of fruitful collaborations be created where trainers who have training experience could provide what they know best, but then also sort of take influences from people who have practical experience in those fields, and kind of combining the best skills of everyone in that way.
Henrik, before we get to technology, and my next question will be for Professor Hajj, but maybe just a short comment I would be interested in from you. Can you see people in audiovisual translation profession maybe upskilling for subtitling and subtitling deaf and hard of hearing, or people from dubbing coming to AD? Because I think even Amalie yesterday in her talk mentioned that, people in Denmark working on SDH are often people coming from subtitling background. Do you have some information from this, or at least sense of some common mood in AFTEV, for example, or in the European, or from point of view of European professionals?
We had, AVTE had a meeting just last week with a major global end client discussing the need for quality subtitling for the deaf and hard of hearing, and for audio description. They were expecting a surge in those two things particularly, and they were, I'm not going to pretend I know what they were thinking, but to me, it sounded like they were unsure of how to deal with that. And so that was them reaching out a hand to us. How can we solve this together? And I know that a lot of translators jump between SDH and translated subtitling already. And we have good subtitlers as well that do a lot of AD.
I think this would be a great topic also for but further debate later, because we can see this happening in many countries with implementation of the new, directives on accessibility across the countries, and in countries maybe where things have worked better for longer, it's not such an issue, and in countries where there was very minor, for example, provision of subtitling for deaf and hard of hearing, then all of a sudden looking for translators, subtitlers, audio describers who are trained in this area can be difficult. And also, I think it was Gian Maria Greco who mentioned it yesterday that this doesn't mean just new technical skill and maybe going through some guidelines on what should be done and how, but it means really knowing the end user and knowing the whole culture. So this is a really interesting aspect if we look at it from this way. But I would also like to look at the aspect of technology, and I will turn to Professor Haic, who is here with us online. And Professor Haic, we spoke a lot about technology during the whole 2 days so far. And I think what was also very, very interesting today, if you followed us online, was that for me, this is one of the first bigger events when we spoke quite a lot, not only about technology and accessibility, or in terms of having technology helping to provide text which will be accessible to audiences, but about technology being accessible to users. That means to translators with specific needs, to subtitlers with specific needs. From your experience, is this an area which is growing, where the interest is growing? And also, what is the reaction of academia? Because from my experience, at least in the Central European region, we are not very often looking that much into this area, saying that you can learn this and that tool, or maybe this and that assisted or automated tool, because it can actually help you. We more speak about how can it speed up the process.
Okay, I am coming from the sort of the core business of developing language technology and machine translation as we all see it, in the very simple way of simply translating from language X to language Y. But I can observe as well, especially with my colleagues in our institute, but also in other places in the Czech Republic, that some of the technologies are actually looking at sort of the surrounding areas, which is also connected to language and translation, like you mentioned, the accessibility. For example, our colleagues in Pilsen are working very hard for many years on sign language. This is something which is normally not considered to be part of the core machine translation business, but of course it's a very important point for various uses, especially in the media and elsewhere. And there are some results, especially in terms of generating sign language. It is much worse in the opposite direction, to recognize sign language and translate it back to text. But these are all technologies that will certainly come up, and maybe faster than we think, because the progress in AI, in artificial intelligence, and of course, language is part of it, are so fast that we can see this coming relatively soon. I mean, obviously, audiovisual translation or subtitling needs additional skills, and the same can be said about the software, about the tools that we are developing. So one thing is translation as such of continuous news text, but it's a completely different thing if we have to follow other constraints in the translation business, like specific domain or the restrictions given by the audiovisual translation and so on. But I think these are all topics that are watched by the language technology community. I think still there is a lot of focus on machine translation itself, because it still does not perform the way that people from the technology domain would like to see it. But also in these sort of complementary or surrounding areas, like you mentioned.
Well, thank you very much. And then maybe if you could provide us your insight and help us with this difficult task when we say that we are actually trying to prepare trainers for something that will only happen once they graduate. And if we're saying here that we are moving from translation more towards accessibility or for someone, because depends how you define translation, towards broader understanding of translation, which of the tools should the universities react then in their curricula? Because I think if we say CAT tools, if we say machine translation, this is something which is done almost everywhere. Well, not everywhere, but almost everywhere. I am, the believer. But if we want to move on and if we want to prepare our trainees for something that they might face or come across, which other technologies should we slowly start implementing in the training, at least to provide the basic experience which they can build on later?
Well, this is, I actually agree what Diego has said before, that, we have to train the translators to be able to adapt quickly. I think this is probably true with almost any field in the education system, because things are simply getting in faster, not only because of technology, but because of the development of the society. We need to make sure that people understand that they will have to learn themselves in the future, and then the changes in technology and elsewhere will be coming in even a faster pace than they are today. So again, I definitely agree that the technicalities maybe are not so important as are this overall approach that maybe tomorrow the CAT tools will look very differently. Now CAT tools have essentially nothing to do with machine translation. You can integrate it with it, but CAT tools have no element, as such, have no element of artificial intelligence or some, advanced technology, but they could, especially if the core technology of machine translation is reaching, the human level quality, we might need completely different tools to actually help the translators to assess the results and find the problems, which will definitely still be there. There will be no MT, which will be error-free. But there will be different types of problems, maybe than there are today. And this is something that whoever wants to work in the translation business and the surrounding areas like audiovisual translation, accessibility, maybe the sign language, has to accept that this will happen sooner or later to everybody, and they will have to learn these new things which will be available. I think, as I said before, probably quicker than we think.
Well, thank you very much. And yes, I think we would all agree that the development is here and we'll have to accept it. And so will our trainees. For example, if we want our trainees accept something, for us trainers, the task is to prepare them and to say that this is something you can use and how to use it responsibly. But from my experience, I don't know whether it's the same for yours or maybe also for yours when you come across academics in your cooperations. One of the bigger challenges is to keep trainers up to date with the new technologies, yes? Even for me, I would still, as a believer, say that I'm quite young, I have a lot of energy, I'm trying to keep up with technologies, but listening to these panels yesterday, I know that's not true. Because there is a lot we can't do. So what is the way then to involve trainers into keeping up with the trends? In technological advancements, because they are the multipliers later on to trainees, and they are the ones who could make people ready and able for continuous, maybe self-education later on, or upskilling. Professor Haidt, that's a difficult question, but that's one for you, because I'm actually making eye contact with the screen in front of me, and I know that can be tricky.
I actually think that Whereas for the translators, to know the details about the technology and the latest trends is maybe not necessary, because of course they will never be part of the, not never. We also use actually in our projects trained translators, for example, for assessing the quality of machine translation, assessing the quality of the data that we use for machine translation and so on. But they do not have to know all the technicalities. That's a very, very complicated thing. But for the trainers, they probably should know a little bit more about the technology developments to be able to be ready. And when they see new technology coming, they should be able to assess themselves whether this technology has the perspective to become mainstream, and whether that's something they should start incorporating in the curricula for the students or not. So in that respect, probably it is also something we owe as the core technologies to the education of the trainers, to maybe have some accessible, now accessible in a different way, to tell them sort of what we see is coming in the future. For example, we talk about translation, but we should also talk about interpretation. When we talk about audio video, we are closer to interpretation. Interpretation is also coming as a technology, and that will be a completely different change if we can rely on automatic interpreting. And this is something that we know that we are working on it, or someone else is working on it maybe, and that we should tell the people who are going to eventually teach the students translation and interpreting that what we expect to happen in the next a small number of years. So that would be my answer, that the trainer should actually know a little bit more about the technology than they eventually will teach the students, so that they can adjust the curricula the right way.
Which brings us again to what we always say, how we want to strengthen the links between developers, technology developers and companies as well. Of course, that we might have few concerns, but Henrik, you wanted to react? Please go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to say that we all know that this technology is coming, and as practitioners, we don't object to it as such. We just object to it being used as disruptively in our workflow. And we also object to it being used as an argument to cut our rates. If you say that the machine has now done half your job, so we're going to take half your money. We don't like that. But one problem I see with the technology, because it isn't just one technology. There's like millions of different platforms out there, and I find myself struggling with it. And I can only imagine if you're a young practitioner coming into the market, and you have 5 different clients, you're going to have to learn 5 different platforms and 5 different ways of how to subtitle that for this content for these people. And how are the universities going to deal with that? I know that some of them are working with 1 or 2, but no one can work with all of them. I don't have a solution for this, but I see a clear problem.
Tina, do you have a solution? And then we can pass the mic to Diego.
No.
So we can pass the mic to Diego.
But obviously this is something that we think about a lot and talk about a lot, because and that's why I keep saying that we should give a foundation and we should encourage students to be prepared to learn and maybe teach, I don't know if you can teach an attitude, but teach the kind of approach to your work where you're not like afraid of learning new things or afraid of tackling a challenge of learning to use a new platform. And maybe if we're able to provide 1 or 2 platforms during the studies, then and at the same time explain that these are probably not going to be the only ones you're going to encounter, and even if these are the only ones, they're going to keep developing as technology progresses. Sort of verbalize the fact that things will change and you will keep on learning, and you will need to adapt to new things and adopt new ways of using technology. So just kind of having that discussion and being transparent about that with students. So not overpromising, not saying that sort of, okay, you're ready now, you're set for your career, but also maybe not underpromising and sort of having enough of technology teaching during the study so that the students become comfortable with that kind of working and then are able to learn more and have had those conversations where they sort of become aware of the fact that this is how it's going to be, that it's going to be part of my career to keep learning and keep adapting to the changes. I don't think that was a solution. It's just sort of thinking out loud.
Yeah, I think it was very important input because basically what you are referring to, I believe, is that we are more focusing on training the skill, not the particular tool.
Exactly, yes.
Because the particular tool might not be there in 5 years or might not be so major, but it is indeed very challenging. Diego, you wanted to react as well?
Yes, I need to take a step back to what you said about the trainers. And I promised I would not complain, but I need to complain about a couple of things. I'm wondering, well, I do go to many conferences, many of these events. This is probably the biggest one, thank you again. I never met a professor coming from my closer university. Never. And this is a shame, maybe they're listening now and they will be screaming at me about it. I never met them. And I'm part of the steering committee, or I don't know how it's called officially. We basically take care of building the curriculum. And a couple of years ago, they asked me, do we need to teach the CAD tools? And this is a clear sign of disconnection between the two words. So that's the responsibility of academia. And this is what I would like to complain about.
But maybe, Diego, maybe it's just your bad experience, because we know we have many examples of good practice, but it still is very common, and I would be the first one to confirm that, yes, if something like this is happening nowadays, wondering whether we should involve technologies in our training, that's, you know, that's very not much what we should try to work on. And that's why probably for like this, although to some of you it might seem that we are touching up on the same things over and over, but there is a need to mention it over and over again very often. Tina, go ahead.
Just a quick comment that just occurred to me. I have had some conversations with a few colleagues about that perhaps there's a need for internships for professors and lecturers regularly to sort of have these sort of short bursts of real life and seeing, for example, with technology, how it is being currently used and sort of maintaining that sort of contact that you can sort of have the experience of being kind of at entry level in the language industry.
Absolutely. Henrik?
Another thing that I've noticed with academia is that sometimes the people who are teaching at these universities are somewhat far removed from reality. They have subtitled or worked as translators a long time ago, some of them never. And that can be a problem because your students are going to go out there in the real world. And then your philosophies or ideas could be excellent and great, but not very helpful in the real world. And in the real world, more often than not, the expertise that we have as translators will be disregarded by the LSPs, because the LSPs will have an attitude of the client is always right. And so the client, which is the end client, must get whatever the client wants. So if the client has specific guidelines or what's it called, time text style guides, then all of the work, all of the translations that we give to them must fit in that. Well, some of them don't. And in reality, a lot of the end clients don't know what they want. They don't know the first thing about audiovisual translation. And so it's important that we all get together, those of us who know. let's get together all the academics, all of the practitioners, all of the LSPs, all of the technology side. We know what we're talking about. We've got the people. Let's do something together.
And you know, Henry, that I could not agree more with you, because really we can see, and also in EMT, I'm just going back to the EMT survey because it really, some of the results were very inspiring, and we could really see that there is more and more initiative in covering what maybe, and let's say it directly, university can't cover because you have the budgeting strategy, you have the staffing strategy in cooperation with professionals and in cooperation with industry, and probably this will be the way. But we will have a chance still, I'm looking at the time, that's why I'm still looking this direction, but we still will have a chance to provide at least few good examples how to do that from our panelists. But before that, I would still like to give a chance to our audience to have a look at one more thing with me. So let's turn on the other Slido. There was a question for Professor Hajc. So let's turn on the other Slido. Someone can look at it slowly, but Professor Hajc, I would like to hear from you. I just didn't see you on the screen for a while. Please go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to react to, I think, what Henrik said at this round of, when we discuss how the trainers should be trained to reflect the technology. I think the example of having 5 different CAD tools and how to deal with it, because it's impossible to teach the students, so many different things. And then, of course, when they go to the practical life, they will encounter the 6th and 7th and 8th. And I think it is important to teach the principles. I mean, there is an analogy. I was studying computer science, and I think there is an analogy in programming languages. And again, you can teach 5 different programming languages, but 5 years from the student graduating, there will be 5 other languages. And the students is well prepared if, instead of just knowing the detail, of course they have to know some details, but instead of knowing all the details, they learn the principles. And it's better if the trainer tells them, instead of their, they have to derive the principles on their own. That might not be the best way to do so. So I think for the trainers, a good sort of approach should be to tell them, look, here are CAD tools, and here is MT, and here are, speech translation, and so on. And here are the points. What's the main thing? I mean, which in different tools might be implemented in different ways, but you should be able to, grab it quickly if you know what are the principles, how this thing works, what are the workflows. And of course the workflows might differ slightly between the tools, but there still will be some basic facts that should be learned. Now, of course, this is already going into a level of detail, but as we know, the devil's in the details sometimes. So this is something that I think should be stressed when we talk about training, because this is related to what we said before. Many of us, namely that the students should be trained to adapt throughout their work life to other things, and understand what are the details and what are the principles and what are the technologies, and separate them in the right way, and that they will have an easier life with when they know this.
Well, thank you very much. And also, I think it's important to encourage them exactly in the way as you said, so that they have this self-confidence in believing that many of the skills are actually transferable and they can apply them in various contexts. I'm sorry that I skipped in with a Slido, missing Professor Hajc on the screen in front of me, but the title of this TEF says that we are going beyond text, and in what we are talking about is probably that we are going beyond training translating text, because we should train more. And our audience is already expressing what do they believe was the most important thing they have learned in their studies, although you might be coming from various areas. And again, we can see research skills. That's what we are talking about probably a lot. What do I need? What do I use? How do I use it? Translation skills. So we need to be good translators before we are anything else. CAT tools, theory, localization, and then million things I would be interested in talking about, but we will be slowly running out of time. So before getting to Q&A, I would like to ask two more things shortly to my panelists. And first one, I'll just select for each two of you because of the time. First one, for example, Henrik, if we say that we should train translation, but also more than translation, what should the other things be? Be it becoming assertive, be it technology, what do you think is the most crucial, seeing where the market is moving on now?
Well, I think universities typically don't prepare students for the real world out there in terms of constantly having to work around the clock, because that is what's expected of you. You typically cannot select to be an employee. You will be a freelancer, which means that they will see you as a resource that is available at any given time. That will mean that you're going to work evenings, nights, weekends, holidays, and you can get a lot of stress and health problems from that. And that's important. You need to keep that in mind. We're also competing against each other. Some LSPs have what they call shark tanks, where they just throw money out, and the first one to grab it is the one who gets it, regardless of what you're good at. Adapting to new roles like post-editing and industry needs like SDH and AD. And then also having to do more work than you actually get paid for with the administrative tasks and non-remunerated tasks from the people who give you work.
Diego, for you, I know that you're also trying in several debates to address maybe what is lacking there. But I know that you also developed your own initiatives in providing maybe what you feel that the graduates need more information, where the trainers could use some upskilling, and where also the people who are in profession already could use some more information. So can you shortly introduce what could be used as one of the examples of good practice?
Yeah, sure. That's when I realized that I should stop complaining and do something. I was working with many students for a specific project, and I would get the same questions over and over again. How do I start? What's machine translation? How do I send an invoice, which is an amazing challenge sometimes. So we basically built an online platform which is open for anyone. It's free, it's there. As I said, content is all around on the web. You can find anything. But I thought it would be good to have a single container. So we have a guided roadmap through the content so that we try to fill this gap for the students. It's free. It has been a lot of success during COVID. There's a lot of free time for everybody. More than 3,000 students. I think that this is the kind of initiatives that LSPs should put in place. I just basically funded the technology towards that. But it's been created by many people together, many professionals. And I heard that many professionals, many long-term practitioners have made a good use of it as well.
Well, thank you. And for those of you who would like to find out some more information, you can go to website of Creative Words, to Knowledge Sharing Hub. I think what is offered there is very interesting. And then Tina, you also came up with very interesting initiative, and I'm a big fan myself, which can help trainers, but also young professionals who would be interested in what is happening in AVT, also in accessibility, partially from what I have seen. And it is the platform where academics, trainers, young professionals, but also professionals who've been in practice for a while can communicate and they can keep in touch. So can you just tell us in few words, what is it, where can we find the information, and what can we look forward to?
Yes, well, actually, I was really struck once again in the previous panel with all the comments and questions about, well, how do I network, and could you give us some ideas, and what are some platforms for networking? And I think that's one of the objectives we have, is provide another means for that, and specifically networking not just among professionals but also between professionals and academics, and trying to see what we can do together. and how we can make subtitling specifically, but more broadly audiovisual translation, accessibility translation, so better for everyone, better research, better working conditions, better working practices. The platform is called Subcom. It was founded by myself and my colleague from University College Cork in Ireland, Hannah Sylvester. It's still a work in progress, so it's kind of early days to say how successful it will be, but we have a website with a blog, and we have social media channels where we try to kind of bring practitioners and academics together and figure out what we could do together and what kinds of things we could help each other on and exchange ideas and exchange experiences. We've organized a few online events, mainly for networking, but we also plan to do some more targeted training in the near future and hoping to find ways to disseminate research that would be useful for practitioners in a format that would be useful for practitioners, and also the other way around, to get practitioners feed their insights into new research. So if anyone is interested, get in touch with me, and we have made brand new business cards with all our contact information, so I can share them with you.
And I already have one, and I also got a sticker. But mainly, thank you, Tina, for this initiative, because I just think, from point of view of trainers, I wish there were many more, and also in other areas. Because if we're speaking about young professionals, then we should maybe think and remember also young trainers. And for them, that it can be quite difficult to find and establish the contacts. And Professor Haidt, in case we want to encourage people and maybe direct them to what would be the best way to keeping up with the newest trends in technologies which are there, be it trainers or trainees, which would be the best for where I really should direct my attention and I will at least have a clue what is happening out there?
Yeah, well, that's. I have to admit, we do not run anything like that. We are busy, and my colleagues are busy with improving the technology. So most of the results of the latest results are found in conference papers, because that's the fastest way to make the world know about the latest results. And this is now, of course, the topic of many research places around the world, not only in academia, but of course, as you know, in the big global companies. They also publish their results. Some of them look really amazing, and of course, we all know where the technologies can be also tested and used out there. So I do not have like a web that we would run or any of our colleagues would run that would be specifically aimed at letting the translation professionals in whichever area, like localization or audio video or whatever, to let them know in accessible terms. Again, let me use the word in a different way. But certainly quite often I see articles out there which talk about the technology written by people who are not technologists, who are trying to make it accessible to others. Some of it is hype, but as I said before, sometimes we are surprised ourselves. We surprise ourselves in how fast the progress in this technology is, and so things which we think is a hype might not be hype in 2 years from now. So certainly it is good to watch various technology columns in New York Times or other places which you would not normally connect with technology, but they publish interesting pieces about this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, having Anya on stage, Henrik, means that that's a sign of strict Q&A session. But I hope we will have time to discuss more also after the discussion. But Anya, now, please help me with the Q&A session.
The time. I've got a microphone on. It's come on. I'm sitting here, so it's the time for the Q&A. We've got about 8 minutes. I just wanted to say that there are a lot of questions in the Slido which actually reflect some of the discussion and the tension between whether courses should be more vocational or purely academic, whether the people who teach are perhaps not practitioners and perhaps they're just academics. But I just wanted to highlight a word I noticed in the word cloud, which was critical thinking, which is perhaps something that would which is taught in a lot of academic courses, and that is one skill and lifelong skill that is very important, whatever you do. One of the questions, and I'm going to go for the top question, which has also been discussed to some extent, because Hendrik, you talked about managing expectations and working conditions, but this question is, do universities, associations and the language industry need to talk about fair rates of pay for translators and interpreters' work? Should people be told how to negotiate and understand that perhaps the rates of pay aren't going to win them huge riches? Hendrik?
Absolutely. But that's one thing that the associations can help you with. If you don't learn it at the university, join an association, and we've got some inside information on that. But unfortunately, as freelancers, up until now, or up until recently, it's been a legal grey area whether or not you're allowed to fix prices, if you're allowed to, because we are businesses. So if we agree on a price or a minimum price, we can be accused of being cartels, and then we can be, I don't know, probably not put in jail, but it's not going to be good for us. But that time is over. And so this is a very interesting time that people are allowed to get together and talk about this. And I think the way to go is through your association.
Diego?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, associations, absolutely. As far as university is concerned, I think it's still a little bit disconnected. In Italy, and that connects to the second question also, a professor would talk about rates that are not really current anymore. They're talking about rates that professionals would apply like 20 years ago. And it has changed, no way to go back. So the students are really surprised when they come to us and offer a rate that is not current, not like market rate anymore. And so I don't think university is the way to go, at least in Italy, the way to go in order to gather information about the current market rate.
Well, should I ask perhaps Tina to defend the university's reputation there? Is it something that you should talk about?
To an extent, I think yes. I think it's part of sort of teaching these black business skills and the reality of setting up, starting work as a translator or whatever language professional you are, to have some discussions about how to set rates. It's just that universities probably cannot give the correct answer, and it's a conversation between all the different actors, but I think we should help prepare students for that part of the reality of the market as well. And I also sometimes think very seriously about the responsibility of universities of trying to stay up on kind of how the markets are structured, and should we be sort of encouraging students to seek work in markets that may be unhealthy, like are we doing a disservice to students if we're not aware of some of the difficult realities?
Amelia, just very briefly, so I can
Yeah, just very briefly. Well, if we look at the research which is done via sociology of translation, there is actually interesting research going on working conditions, pricing in various countries. After did that also in cooperation with academia. So I think also when we say with academia, we might not expect that one trainer know, although I would still be happy that that trainer would know what the price range at least is. But the research often is showing us in some regions and some countries at least what usually are the ranges of minimum, maximum, average prices, fees, and all the other information. So I think again looking into the research also in this area as well as in technology can be a good idea. It's not only boring always.
All right, just very briefly, and then we'll go on to the next question.
According to the AVTE survey, which was launched on Tuesday, so it's very recent, it's very current. What affects your rates most significantly in audiovisual translation is not your level of education, it's not your experience, it's even not your area of expertise. It is your willingness to negotiate. So definitely, I would urge universities to put that on the curriculum if you know that your graduates are going into an industry where everyone has to be a freelancer?
Right, I'm going to ask the next question. I'm going to go to Professor Haik because you're patiently waiting there and you might not actually know, have a view on this answer, but I'm going to bring you into this conversation anyway. And it's gone, but it's basically like, I might be getting this completely wrong. I don't know where it's gone. I was just about to talk about it. That's a bit annoying. But anyway, in Spain, professors look at their students as rivals, and in Italy they look at them as potential colleagues. So maybe the other way around, but I just noticed that question. I mean, I know you're neither in Spain nor Italy, Professor, but perhaps you might want to reflect on a potential rivalry, or should there be some kind of collaboration? Is there any truth in that question?
This is a very surprising question to me. Even though I am at the technology faculty, I am not at the translatology department. I think that could be a question there. I can imagine why, but in our case, when we teach technology, work on technology projects, we all see the students as colleagues in our way. And even though obviously, I mean, at consulting, there could be some competition, obviously, because students are often target of companies to do things like this. But because this is more of a very, very side business for us, at least so far, really there is no such hardship between or really strong competition between the students and us.
I'm delighted to hear that. Diego, you were nodding sagely.
Since I'm from Italy, I would say yes. That's absolutely true. The only professor when I was studying that would bring an interpreter student to the booth was a Spanish one. And the other ones would look at all the other students as future colleagues and maybe even share wrong information about the weights or keeping some information from themselves, which is, of course. But it's 20 years ago, so maybe it has changed.
Things have moved on. Perhaps we are being a bit more collaborative now. Okay, we are to time now. We have half an hour before our next session. Amelia and the panelists, thank you so much for a really interesting discussion. We're going to, just a round of applause, please. It's time now for a coffee break, so if you could be back here at 5 o'clock, before 5, for the final session of the day. Thank you.